Welcome back, listeners. We're on chapter 10, A Visit to the Seaside. In the previous chapter, we discussed the visit of Monsignor, Edwin, and Ruth to the dark realms. I split the chapter into two because the visit to the seaside is a cheery and happy section of this chapter. I then bethought me that it was high time I went to have a peep at my house, and so I asked Ruth and Edwin to join me, as I had no wish to be alone or separated from their pleasant company, and Ruth had not yet seen my home, but she had often wondered, so she said, what it would be like. And I thought that a little of the fruit from the garden would be most acceptable after our visit, short though it was, to the lower realms. Everything in the house was in perfect order as I left it to go upon our travels, as though there was someone permanently looking after it. Ruth expressed her complete approval of all she saw and congratulated me upon my choice of a home. In reply to my query as to the invisible agency that was responsible for the good order of the house during my absence, Edwin answered me by himself asking the question, "What is there to disturb the order of the house? There can be no dust because there is no decay of any sort whatsoever. There can be no dirt because here in spirit there's nothing to cause it. The household duties that are so very familiar and so very irksome on the earth plane are here non-existent. The necessity for providing the body with food was abandoned when we abandoned our physical body. The adornments of the home, such as the hangings and upholstery, do not ever need renewal because they do not perish. They endure until we wish to dispense with them for something else. And so, what remains that might require attention? We have then but to walk out of our houses, leaving all doors and windows open. Our houses have no locks upon them, and we can return when we wish to find that everything is as we left it. We might find some difference, some improvement. We might discover, for instance, that some friend had called while we were away and had left some gift for us, some beautiful flowers perhaps, or some other token of kindness. Otherwise, we shall find that our house bids us welcome itself and renews our feeling of being at home. Ruth had wandered all over the house by herself. We have no stupid formalities here. And I had asked her to make the whole house her own whenever she wished and to do whatever she liked. The antique style of the architecture appealed to her artistic nature, and she revelled in the old wooden paneling and carvings, the latter being my own embellishments of the past ages. She eventually came to my small library and was interested to see my own works among the others upon the shelves. One book in particular she was attracted to and was actually perusing it when I entered. The title alone revealed much to her, she said, and then I could feel her sweet sympathy pouring out upon me as she knew what was my great ambition, and she offered me all the help which she could give me in the future towards the realization of this ambition. As soon as she had completed her inspection of the house, we foregathered in the sitting room, and Ruth asked Edwin a question which I had been meaning to ask him myself for some time. Was there a sea somewhere? If there were lakes and streams, then perhaps there was an ocean? Edwin's answer filled her with joy. Of course there was a seaside, and a very beautiful one. Ruth insisted upon being conducted there at once, and under Edwin's guidance, we set forth. We were soon walking along a beautiful stretch of open country with the grass like a green velvet carpet beneath our feet. There were no trees, but there were many fine clumps of healthy-looking shrubs, and of course plenty of flowers growing everywhere. At length, we arrived at some rising ground, and we felt that the sea must be beyond it. A short walk brought us to the edge of the grassland, and then the most glorious panorama of ocean spread out before us. The view was simply magnificent. Never had I expected to behold such sea. Its coloring was the most perfect reflection of the blue of the sky above, but in addition, it reflected a myriad rainbow tints in every little wavelet. The surface of the water was calm, but this calmness by no means implies that the water was lifeless. There is no such thing as lifeless or stagnant water here. From where we were, I could see islands of some considerable size in the distance, islands that looked most attractive and must certainly be visited. Beneath us was a fine stretch of beach upon which we could see people seated at the water's edge. But there was no suggestion of overcrowding. And floating upon this superb sea, some close at hand, others standing a little way out, were the most beautiful boats, though I think I'm not doing them full justice by calling them mere boats. Ships would be more apposite. I wondered who could own these fine vessels, and Edwin told us that we could own one ourselves if we so wished. Many of the owners lived upon them, having no other home but their boat. It made no difference. There they could live always, for here it is perpetual summer. A short walk down a pleasant winding path brought us to a sandy seashore. Edwin informed us that it was a tireless ocean and that at no place was it very deep by comparison with terrestrial seas. Storm and wind being impossible here, the water was always smooth, and in common with all water in these realms, it was of a pleasantly warm temperature that could occasion no feelings of cold or even chilliness to bathers. It was, of course, perfectly buoyant, possessed no single harmful element or characteristic, but it was, on the contrary, life-sustaining. To bathe in its waters was to experience a perfect manifestation of spiritual force. The sand upon which we were walking had none of the unpleasant features associated with the seashore of the earth plane. It was never tiring to walk on, although it had every appearance of sand as we had always known it. Yet, to tread, it was firm in consistency, although soft to the touch of the hand. In fact, this peculiar quality rendered it more like a well-kept lawn to walk on, so closely did the grains hold together. We took some handfuls of the sand and allowed it to run through our fingers, and great was our surprise to find that it lacked every trace of grittiness, but seemed to the touch more akin to some smooth, soft powder. Yet, examined closely, it was undeniably solid. It was one of the strangest phenomena we had met so far. Edwin said that was because we had, in this particular instance, carried out a more minute examination of what we were beholding than we had done hitherto in other things. He added that if I chose to make a close scrutiny of all that we saw, whether it was the ground we walked on, the substance of which our houses were made, or the 1,001 other objects that go into the making of the spirit world, we should be living in a state of continual surprise, and there would be revealed to us some small idea, but only a very small idea, of the magnitude of the great mind, the greatest mind in the universe that upholds this and every other world. Indeed, the great scientists of the earth plane find, when they come to live in the spirit world, that they have a completely new world upon which to commence a fresh course of investigations. They begin de novo, as it were, but with all their great earthly experience behind them. And what joy it brings them, in company with their scientific colleagues, to probe the mysteries of the spirit world, to collect their data, to compare their new knowledge with the old, to record it for the benefit of others, the results of their investigations and discoveries. And all through, they have the unlimited resources of this spirit world upon which to draw, and joy is in their hearts. Our little experiment with the sand led us to place our hands in the sea. Ruth fully expected it to taste of salt, but it did not, much to her surprise. As far as I could observe, it had no taste at all. It was sea more by virtue of its great area and the characteristics of the adjacent land than anything else. In all other respects, it resembled the water of the brooks and lakes. In general appearance, the whole effect was totally unlike the earthly ocean, due, among other things, to the fact that there was no sun to give its light from one quarter only and to cause that change of aspect when the direction of the sunlight changes. The overspreading of light from the great central source of light in the spirit world, constant and unmoving, gives us perpetual day. But it must never be assumed that this constancy and immobility of light means a monotonous and unchanging land or seascape. There are changes going on the whole time, changes of color such as man never dreamt of until he comes to the spirit world. The eyes of the spirit person can see so many beautiful things in the world of spirit that the eyes of incarnate man cannot see unless he be gifted with the psychic eye. We wanted very much to visit one of the islands that we could see in the distance, but Ruth felt that it would be a nice experience to travel over the sea in one of the fine vessels that were close to the shore. But the difficulty arose, that is, it seemed as though it might arise, as to the boat. If, as I understood, these were privately owned, we should first have to become acquainted with one of the owners. Edwin, however, could see how Ruth was so longing to go upon the water that he soon explained the exact position to her unbounded joy. It seemed that one of these elegant boats belonged to a friend of his. But had it been otherwise, we should have found that we would be welcome to go aboard any of them, introducing ourselves, if we wished to observe that formality, though it was unnecessary, to whomsoever we found on board. Had we not already received, wherever we went, that friendly reception and assurance that we were welcome? Then why should there be any departure in the case of the boats of the sea from the fundamental rule of hospitality that operates in the spirit world? Edwin drew our attention to a very beautiful yacht that was riding at anchor close to the shore. From where we were, she had all the appearance of having had much attention devoted to her. Our opinion was afterwards confirmed. She was built on the most graceful lines, and the grand upward sweep of her bows held the promise of power and speed. She looked much the same as an earthly yacht, that is, externally. Edwin sent a message across to the owner, and in reply received an instantaneous invitation to us all. We therefore wasted no time, and we found ourselves upon the deck of this most handsome vessel, being greeted with great good cheer by our host, who immediately took us off to present us to his wife. She was very charming, and it was obvious to see that the two made a perfect couple. Our host could see that Ruth and I were both very keen to see over the boat, and knowing from Edwin that we had not been in spirit long, he was so much the more pleased to do so. Our first observations at close hand showed us that many devices and fittings that are essential to earthly ships were here absent. That indispensable adjunct, an anchor for instance. There being no winds, tides, or currents in spirit waters, an anchor becomes superfluous. Though we were told that some boat owners have them merely as an ornament and because they did not feel the vessels would be complete without them. There was unlimited space on deck with a copious provision of very comfortable looking chairs. Below deck were well-appointed saloons and lounges. Ruth, I could see, was disappointed because she could see no evidence whatsoever of any motive power to drive the vessel, and she naturally concluded that the yacht was incapable of independent movement. I shared her disappointment, but Edwin had a merry twinkle in his eye, which ought to have told me that things are not always what they seem in the spirit world. Our host had received our thoughts, and he immediately took us up into the wheelhouse. What was our astonishment when we saw that we were slowly and gently moving away from the shore. The others laughed merrily at our bewilderment, and we ran to the side to watch our progress through the water. There was no mistake about it. We were really on the move, and gathering speed as we went. We returned at once to the wheelhouse and demanded an instant explanation of this apparent wizardry. Our host told us that the power of thought is almost unlimited in the spirit world, and that the greater power of any particular effort or concentration of thought, the greater the results. Our means of personal locomotion here is by thought, and we can apply the same means to what the earth world would call inanimate objects. Of course, in the spirit world, nothing is inanimate. And because of this, then, our thoughts can have a direct influence upon all the countless things of which the world of spirit is composed. Ships are meant to float and move upon the waters. They are animated by the living force that animates all things here. And if we wish to move them over the waters, we have but to focus our thoughts in that direction and with that intention, and our thoughts produce the desired results of movement. We could, if we wished, call upon our scientific friends to provide us with splendid machinery to supply the motive power, and they would be only too pleased to oblige us. But we should have to focus our thoughts upon the machinery to make it generate the necessary driving force. Why then go this long way around to produce the same result when we can do so directly and just as efficiently? But it must not be concluded that anyone can move a boat through the water merely by thinking that it shall do so. It requires, like so many other things, the requisite knowledge, its application upon well-ordered lines, and practice in the art. A natural aptitude greatly helps in these matters, and our host told us that he mastered the subject in a very short time. Once the ability has been gained, it gives one, so he said, a most satisfying feeling of power rightly applied, and not only of power, but the power of thought, in a way that is not perhaps possible in some other ways. Perfect as the movement of our cells can be through the realms, yet the movement of such a large object as a boat simply and easily magnifies the wonder of the whole spirit life. Our host explained that this was only his point of view and was not to be taken as an axiom. His enthusiasm was increased by his enthusiasm for the water and a love of ships. We noticed that he guided the boat in the usual manner with a rudder operated by the wheel in the deck house. That, he said, was because he found it sufficient work to provide the movement of the boat. In time, if he wished, he could combine the two actions in one. But he much preferred the use of the old method of steering by hand, as it gave him physical work to do, which was in itself such a pleasure. Once having given motion to the ship, he could forget about it until he wished to stop. And the mere wishing to stop, however suddenly or gradually, brought the vessel to a standstill. There was no fear of accidents. They do not, cannot exist in these realms. All the while our host was explaining these matters to Ruth and me, Edwin was busily engaged in conversation with our host's wife. Our speed had increased to a steady rate, and we were moving in the direction of the islands. The yacht was traveling through the sea with the most perfect steady motion. There was no vibration, naturally, from any machinery, but the very movement through the water could be perceptibly felt, while the sounds from the gentle waves as the boat cut along made the loveliest musical notes and harmonies as the many colors of disturbed water changed their tints and blends. We observed in our wake the water quickly settled into its former state, leaving no appearance of our having passed through it. Our host handled his craft skillfully, and by increasing or diminishing its speed could create, by the different degree of movement of water, the most striking alterations of color and musical sound. Brilliant scintillations of the sea showing how alive it was. It responded to the boat's every movement as though they were in complete unison, as indeed they were. Ruth was simply ecstatic in her enjoyment and ran to our host's wife in the full ardor of her new experience. The latter, who fully appreciated her young friend's feelings, was just as enthusiastic. Although it was no novelty, in the sense of a first experience, she said she could never cease to marvel, however familiar she should become with her ship home, at the glorious dispensation that provided such beauties and pleasures for dwellers in spirit lands. That's it for this chapter, folks. I'll see you next time. Till then, stay healthy, stay happy. Bye for now.